What if I told you that I was a communist? Undercover.
Welcome to the world of spycraft.
We sent you to America so you could be our mold. But what happens to a mold when it is suddenly thrust into the sun?
This is counterintelligence. It gets wet down here.
What are you concealing?
I don't know if I can go on like this.
Good afternoon and welcome to Washington Post Live, co-produced with the Capehart podcast. I'm Jonathan Capehart, associate editor at the Washington Post. The Sympathizer is a 7-part espionage thriller following The Captain, a French-Vietnamese communist spy in the last days of the Vietnam War. And it tells the story of the Vietnam War from the Vietnamese perspective. It's so fabulous that the Washington Post has named it one of the, quote, best new TV shows in 2024 so far. And having watched 5 of the 7 episodes so far, I can say that's an accurate assessment. Joining me now is the breakout star of The Sympathizer, Hoa Xuande. Hoa, welcome to Capehart on Washington Post Live.
Hey, Jonathan, thanks for having me. And thanks for, the assessment of this show. I'm thrilled.
No, it is terrific. I was trying to get through all of it before we talked, though the season finale hasn't premiered yet. But let's bring people into this conversation. Your character, the Captain, is a North Vietnamese spy who has infiltrated the South Vietnamese army. So how does he end up in Los Angeles?
Right. The thing is, it wasn't his wish to end up in the States or Los Angeles. I guess it was a part of his mission that he thought would be ending, but his blood brother, Man, who is his communist handler and a confidant, decides that, even though the physical war has ended, that, potentially all those people that are escaping could potentially be seeking retribution, including the general who's escaping. And so his mission is to go and embed himself within the South Vietnamese escapees and see if there is any potential reignition of, the war.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As a double agent, you're essentially playing 2 people. And we have a clip that speaks to the Captain's identity. Let's watch this.
We were on your side.
Really? And which side was that?
The side of the Vietnamese people.
Oh, which people? The people in the North or the people in the South?
Well, all of them, I guess.
Guess we all look the same after all, right? I mean, I could be Viet Cong, for all you know. Undercover. How would you know?
That was such a fantastic scene because it's so cringeworthy on so many levels and speaks to sort of, how Americans, particularly back then, had no clue about what was really happening there. And it speaks to something that I think it's the opening credits of the series, where it says that the war is called the American War in Vietnam. And so talk about how that exchange between the Captain and the reporter speaks to the lack of understanding of the war in the United States.
Right. I think that's it, to your point, that I think for a long time, for the past 5 decades, when we talk about the Vietnam War, it's been from a very, Western, let alone, an American-centric perspective, let alone Western perspective. And it just goes to show you how little we know of the actual conflict, because, the war was sold in a very particular way as, I hate to use terms like us and them, but, I guess the West coming in to save Vietnamese people, potentially even from themselves. And that narrative has been perpetuated through movies and stereotyped Vietnamese people as, communists, people who need to needed to be saved from themselves. You know, people weren't even aware that the Vietnamese were in conflict with themselves. You know, a lot of, especially when you look at this junior reporter in this scene, it was as if it was a war between Americans and Vietnamese, when in fact it essentially wasn't. It was a civil war in which the Americans picked a side, which happened to be the South, and they aided the South in the conflict, and they were just a part of the war. They weren't the actual conflict.
Mhm.
And so when you talk about the war that actually happened in Vietnam, yeah, there's a big piece missing in terms of that history of the war, that when the Vietnamese talk about it, it's actually called the American War. And there's a lot of conflicts and ideological battles and, you know, conflicts of belief that happened within that war that we never hear about because we're so, we've concentrated our um, history on just one side of what we think the war was about.
Mhm. Now, listening to you talk about that, it's
Mm.
fascinating, because you speak with such knowledge and authority, not just as an actor who plays in this series, but you did a lot of deep research into this. You talked to well, you talked to your parents, but I want you to talk about how you went about researching all of this and coming to be able to prepare yourself to play the captain in The Sympathizer. Did we lose Hua's? Did we lose? You're mute, and I don't know.
I haven't gone mute.
There
No?
you are.
Oh, hi. It
Hi.
must be a connection thing. Hi. Yeah, so you know, I heard a lot of these stories from my parents growing up, but you know, I never really paid attention to it, shamefully, because I guess, you know, growing up in Australia, I never really thought it was something that I would have to that was really a significant part of my upbringing, until when you get thrown projects like this, until you start really reading up about things that really happened to, say, my parents. You start to realize, you know, why you're here, why they decided to move away from Vietnam. You know, all the trauma and devastation that they had to experience as young adults. You know, you could never really fathom growing up in, you know, countries like America and Australia. And so I use that as a basis to really dig deeper into reading about, I guess, even other accounts of other Vietnamese experiences of what they felt during that time of the conflict. Because, you know, there's so many stories that are just as significant, that are just as traumatic and you know, detailed and brilliant and uh, devastating, that is never really told to us because it's always been from that one perspective, from the Western perspective. And so I did a lot of reading on the interwebs, the internet, of different articles. I looked up a lot of YouTube videos of documentaries, and I found actually Vietnamese documentaries about the time, you know, as opposed to a lot of the documentaries that we're so used to seeing about the Vietnam War. I tried to really source Vietnamese perspectives because I felt like ultimately that would inform my character and what the perspectives that were really prevalent at the time for Vietnamese people, especially on the ground in Saigon, as opposed to what the Americans viewed would be the perspective of Vietnamese people from afar.
Mhm.
So that's sort of the stuff that I went into to try and build a world and build my psychological uh, belief system in terms of what the captain was.
And we just showed, as you were answering the question, a photo of you with your parents and I believe
Yeah.
and a sister. And you told the New York Times that about your parents. You said they had to escape on a boat. They were
Yeah.
months at sea, and they made it to Indonesia, where they made
Right.
it to a refugee camp. And
Mm.
you brought your parents to the premiere of
Yeah.
the Sympathizer. How did they react seeing part of their history on screen?
Yeah. You know, I I wanted them to come to the premiere because, you know, I didn't know if I would ever be able to give them that opportunity again. I just wanted them to experience the Hollywood, you know, experience and give them a premiere and the red carpet walk and everything like that as well. But more importantly, I wanted to see them watch something that was so pertinent to their history that has never really been reflected back to them in this way. You know, to have a theater full of people that are going to experience this story for the first time, and to see what their reactions are, and to see my parents' reaction to that. Because for a long time, I felt like, you know, being Vietnamese, and especially for people of my parents' generations, their trauma and their feelings towards that part of their lives was just treated as insignificant, or treated as, you know, something to get over, something that really was something that happened in the past, and now we can all move on from. And in the dying seconds of episode one, which is what we showed at the premiere, you know, with the escape of Saigon and the bombings, and, you know, people escaping and dying on the runway, I could see my mother have this sort of tear form in the corner of her eye, and it sort of justified to me that we were really trying to tell this story accurately to the time. And, you know, speaking to my parents afterwards, it brought back memories of what it was like to be there during the fall of Saigon, because they were there.
Let's talk about you, because in the series, a former military officer who fled to Los Angeles with the captain says, and I quote, "If you fully commit to this land, you become fully American. But if you
Yeah.
don't, you're just a wandering ghost living between two worlds forever." You are a child of Vietnamese immigrants who settled in Australia. Could you relate
Right.
to your character's exploration of identity and living between two worlds?
100%, 100%. And I think that was really what formed the basis of my character. You know, I leaned on that, um, I guess, experience growing up in Australia to really form who this character was at his core. Because, you know, on the surface of it all, the captain is a spy and he has allegiances, and he has to play that battle of survival, you know, to live or to die. And but at his core, he is really a person who struggles to figure out who he truly is, whether he feels he is more, so to speak, Oriental, or whether he's more Occidental. And I guess growing up in Australia, like I said before, I really never felt Vietnamese, because I was born there. I had very little sort of Asian, let alone Vietnamese friends. And a lot of the people that I grew up with were predominantly, I guess, you know, homegrown Australians who played a lot of sports, and you know, they had a very specific culture that was not the culture that I was seemingly a part of, but it was the only culture that I knew. And so that's what I focused my energy on when I was a childhood. And then, you know, to be told that I was Vietnamese, that I should be speaking the language, that I was actually, you know, this and that, I didn't relate to that. So yeah, like what the major says in the show, it's just like it felt like I was forever wandering this middle line of not really knowing who I was for a long time.
Hmm.
Um, and it was inherently something that I could relate to when I read the book. Yeah.
Yeah, well, speaking of the sports, you played Australian rules football, track,
Yeah.
swimming.
Yeah.
So not
Yeah.
overachieving, not overachieving much, doing all the
Yeah.
sports. But so you're now this big time actor, but that's not how all this started. You got a degree in journalism?
Yeah, it's not quite a degree. It's a diploma in journalism, which is actually a little bit different in Australia.
Okay.
It's below undergraduate studies. It's like
Okay.
yeah. I'm not sure what the equivalent is in the States, but it's a year that I did of journalism, because when I left school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had a very sport heavy upbringing, and that was part of my assimilation to Australian culture. It's what I felt like I connected to more, and what I thought I could do as a career. But I left school and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But I knew that I always loved words. I loved writing, and I loved just being able to express myself, uh, you know, through language. And I didn't know what to do with that, so I just randomly went into doing a diploma in journalism, which was at a year course, figuring out how to write and catchy headlines and things like that for newspaper and articles like that. But I didn't when I finished the diploma, I didn't feel like this was wholly what I wanted to do. Something still felt missing, and so I kind of just tried to divert and figure other things out. And I guess, whether it found me or I found it, acting was the way in which I felt like I could pull all of the passions that I had in terms of language and expressing myself and words and things like that.
Well,
But
in
yeah,
fact,
I could have been a journalist, but I don't think I would have been a good one.
oh, please, you got out after a year. You had seen enough.
Yeah. I don't know how you do it. Yeah.
Half the time I don't know how I do it either. But Hua, you said in reflecting on your acting journey in Australia, you said, and I quote, "My hopes were just to try and be the token Asian on
Yeah.
TV. If I could at least do that, I felt I could make a career." I mean, it's a bit of a flip line and one that's based in reality. But talk about the
Mm.
challenges and limitations you've encountered in the entertainment industry prior to this breakout role.
Yeah. So I guess it's a breakout role for me and my first major production in a leading role, especially in Hollywood. But I have been doing this for the better part of a decade. And, I went to drama school. I actually went to the Western Australian Academy of Performing Arts, which is a major theatre school in Australia, has alums such as like Hugh Jackman and Jai Courtney and, Heath Ledger even went there. But the thing with that is that when I graduated, I had all these hopes and dreams and skills I would like to think to be able to do what I'm doing now. But for a long time, I was thrown scripts and thrown opportunities that were just basically, for lack of a better word, token. And for a long time, I thought that if this was the reality of my career, then if I could at least be that in every show that I was given the opportunity to audition for, then I could make a career as an actor. And that was my reality. And I
Mhm.
accepted it and I didn't really mind it until I guess things like this come along that which makes you realize that you could actually be more than just token. Yeah.
Well, I was about to ask you what appealed to you about the sympathizer when you got the script and you read it. Your first reaction.
My first reaction is that, wow, I actually get to have a journey that is fully laid, fully felt, three-dimensional, and it felt like I can play beyond the mere stereotypes of what Asian males are usually portrayed as in the media. I felt like I was actually playing a human being. So I was excited by that. And also, it's a journey that not only, takes you, on a journey of a character, it takes you on this really, insane ride of hilarity, but also trauma and devastation and moral conflict and, you know, love as well. So all of that intertwined, it was just something like a dream come true.
Mhm. All right, so we've now been talking 20 minutes. I'm always fascinated by non-American actors
Mm.
who get these roles where they speak American English and they're
Right.
flawless, absolutely flawless.
Oh,
I
thank you.
didn't know
Thank
you
you.
were from Australia until after I'd started watching, and then I'm, preparing. So wait, he's from Australia, and I'm listening
Yeah,
to you. You're from Australia.
yeah,
How
yeah, yeah.
how hard did you work to? I mean, your American accent in The Sympathizer is American. It's
Oh, thank
spectacular.
you. That is a massive compliment. Thank you so much. It took a lot of work and I had been auditioning for American projects before, but I never really felt confident enough to pull it off in this way. And to be honest, when I literally stepped off the plane here to begin doing the project, s- I stayed in the accent, and I think it really helped me in that way because it never allowed me to falter. I would just fully commit. And there was a lot of people in the crew and on set who'd never met me before, besides obviously the producers and the creatives and the directors, who thought the whole time that I was American. So that assured me, and that instilled the confidence in me to really just be American for the duration of my shoot. But yeah, thank you. It's a huge compliment every time I hear that, because it just assures me that I can do it.
Oh, you absolutely can do it. Come on, man. All right, so you talked about the cast and the crew. So we have to talk about the two big characters in the
Right.
Sympathizer. We're gonna take them one after the other. The first one, um, Robert Downey Jr.,
Okay.
who you have said was like a father figure. And
Right.
for those of you who are watching right now, when you get to pay attention to the scene in the steakhouse, because that was just sheer brilliance, because there's like 5 different Robert Downey Juniors
Yeah.
around
Yeah.
that table. What what was he like to work with, and how important did he become to you?
Yeah. Honestly, when you think of a big A-lister name, and you think of one day that you might get to work with someone like that, you know, it I'm not sure about you or the audience that are listening to this, but it's intimidating. You feel like,
Mhm.
oh wow, are you out of your depths? Like, would you even be able to, go one on one with an actor who's obviously now an Oscar winner? But the thing that I loved about Robert is that when he stepped onto set for the first time and met me, he sort of just put his hand on my shoulder and just really sort of lifted me up to his level, and it made me feel like that I was acting opposite just another actor, that I was not acting opposite some, you know, real, this critically acclaimed, talented actor. Uh, and he made things fun. He made things really, he's just a really goofy personality, and he's just really down to earth. So it made me feel like I was working with another partner in an acting class. And that was what he was like throughout the whole shoot. He would make sure that I was happy with my takes. He would make sure that we were having fun. He would just make sure that I was at ease and confident with my choices, and that I had belief in everything that I did. And he never wanted to take that away from me. He was always with me in these scenes. Sometimes you hear
Mhm.
stories of, things that don't quite work out, but he was there for all of it. So I really appreciate it. And he's continued to be generous and supportive ever since as well. So
And
I can't thank him enough.
uh-huh. And if Robert Downey Jr. is the father figure, as you're quoted as
Yeah,
saying, Sandra Oh is the mother figure. Talk
sure.
about why talk about why she was the mother figure, and what it was like to work with her.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I say that in the sense that, Sandra was just so caring. She's so lovely, and she's so bubbly as a person. When you're new and you're sort of doing your first major production, when you're so used to doing, little speaking roles or guest roles or co-star roles and this, that, and the other, you don't always know what the boundaries are, or you don't always know what you're allowed to do or not to do. But Sandra really, you know, she was really in my corner in that way. She spoke up on things that she knew that I didn't feel comfortable with. She always made sure that I got enough sleep, that I had enough to eat. She always made sure that I knew, that there were things that I couldn't do. And if I felt uncomfortable about anything, she'd be the first to speak up on my behalf to the producers. And I really appreciated that, especially someone who's just, for a while there, just trying to learn his lines and make scenes work.
Hey,
Yeah,
For instance, give me an example of her speaking up on your behalf when you didn't feel comfortable speaking up.
sure. And it's nothing that, that I didn't feel uncomfortable in terms of the work environment. It's just, I think when you're in every scene of every, part of this show, you're burdened with the ability to even find time to sleep or have a break, or um, you know being able to tell producers that I need more time for this scene, and etc., or I need more time to flesh out this moment, or I need time to figure out rehearsals for this part of the show. And Sandra felt that from me, and she would just basically liaise with the producers or the directors and just be like, he needs time for this, or he needs a break at the moment for that moment, or this is too much for today and we need to separate the schedule. And so she really had a keen eye on being able to tell what I needed and relay that to the producers in that way. So yeah.
Hmm. Let me get you on two questions because I can't believe we're
Mm,
almost out of time. First question:
mm,
the author of The Sympathizer wrote a sequel called The Committed. Will there
yes.
be a second season of The Sympathizer?
Um, I mean, that's the big question. I hope so. I hope so. And in the way that this show is being received so far, and in all the reviews that have been coming out, you know, I hope that people are excited enough to demand that second season, because the second book, The Committed, is just another whirlwind of a journey, and there's so much more for these characters to do and explore. And um, yeah, what we go through in this first season is only a portion of so much more of the story that happens in the second book. Yeah.
All right, I lied. I have two last questions. One,
Sure.
which I completely forgot to bring up earlier on in the conversation, but The
Mm,
Sympathizer had a majority Asian cast and crew. What was that?
yeah.
What was that like?
I think it was special. It was special in the way that when we tell these stories about the Vietnam War, it's usually from that perspective that, I guess we've been talking about,
Right.
the Western, if not American perspective. And to have Vietnamese people at the forefront of this show telling stories about them, and even being able to speak Vietnamese for pretty much 40-50% of this show is a huge turn in terms of the way we view this part of our history. And so it was really nice to work with people or actors who were in the same level as me, great actors who'd never been given this opportunity before, from Fred and Zui, who play my blood brothers, to V, who's the youngest cast member. She's, Vietnamese, and I think she was out of drama school at the time. I'm sure she never thought that she could have an opportunity like this leaving drama school. So and um, then Alan, who plays my rival uh, in this show, and he's had actually as extensive a Hollywood career as I have. He's been being able to play like little guest roles here and there, but to have a fully formed character that challenges mine was great to see. All these Vietnamese young actors given big opportunities, I guess, is what I'm
I-
trying to
Is
say.
is Alan the investigative reporter guy?
Yes, he
Oh,
is. He was playing the journalist, and he absolutely nailed that. Yeah.
oh my God, his character, man. Ooh. Oh, I
Yeah.
felt for you. In one particular scene, I was like, "Wait, what? Him? No,
Yeah.
I don't want to give it
And it
away."
gets yeah. And it gets, I think you said you were on episode 5?
Yes.
But yeah, that well, just yeah, you'll see what happens between me and him the next episode. I
Oh,
won't spoil it. Yeah.
oh, whoa, that's what we call a tease. Um,
Yeah.
Hoa Xuande, the star of the HBO series The Sympathizer. Thank you so much for coming to Capehart and Washington Post Live. Congratulations on this huge role, and I cannot wait to see what you're in next. It's like literally like watching a star being born on the screen.
Ah, Jonathan, thank you so much for the compliments. But and honestly, it's been a pleasure to be on the show, and that was a great questions. So thank you.
Well, I look forward to watching season 2. You hear that, HBO? Season 2. Thanks again,
Season
Hua.
2. Cool. Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us. For more of these important and fun conversations, sign up for a Washington Post subscription. Get a free trial by visiting, you'll see it on the screen, washingtonpost.com/live. washingtonpost.com/live. Once again, I'm Jonathan Capehart, Associate Editor at The Washington Post. Thank you for watching Capehart on Washington Post Live.